All right, let's talk about the wine industry. And back with me today is Andy Perdue, and this is the second time that I've had Andy on as a guest. And Andy, I'm just really glad that you're here to talk with us about wine. You have developed quite a knowledge base about this industry. Earlier, Andy told me this is the best job he's ever had.
Oh, easily.
Why? Why? Why do you feel that way?
Well, as I like to say, I drink and play on the internet all day. So
that is great.
well, and this is a growing industry. When I started writing about the wine industry back in 1997, there were maybe 75 or 80 wineries in Washington and maybe 200 in the whole Northwest. Today there's 850 in Washington and close to 2,000 wineries in the whole Northwest. So it's an amazing industry and there's a lot to write about. So I decided to turn it into a full-time career.
So you put together Great Northwest Wines,
Mm-hmm.
and that is, what do you do with it? That is basically your writing base?
Yeah, my business partner Eric Degerman, I think you know Eric from when he covered
Mm-hmm.
the Americans back in the early days of the hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
He and I left the TriCity Herald at the end of 2012 and created this business called Great Northwest Wine, and we use that. Yeah, it's kind of our base. We write for that website every day, 4 times a day actually. We post stories, and then in addition we write for other publications, including the TriCity Herald, including the Seattle Times, and then several other periodicals and newspapers. We run wine competitions, and we do a few other things. So it's we have a weekly podcast that appears on the Apple iTunes store, things like that. So so yeah, it keeps us very, very busy.
It does. Well, I'm really curious as to know if you feel that there are any major differences between the Tri-City Herald audience and the Seattle Times audience. Do you write differently for those two groups?
Well, my Seattle Times column appears in the Sunday Pacific Northwest magazine, which is an insert in the paper,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a 500-word column, typically very focused on Washington wine or Northwest wine. Occasionally, I'll write about other areas. For example, this Sunday's column is focused on vintage champagnes from the Champagne region of France, which is a rare non-Northwest column for me. The column that appears in the Tri-City Herald actually is a column that Eric and I write together, and it's syndicated in 22 newspapers. So it's slightly longer. We try to make it a little broader focus. So, for example, if like this Wednesday's column is on Cabernet Sauvignon, so because the column appears in the Wenatchee World, and the Spokesman Review up in Spokane, and the Bellingham Herald and Tacoma News Tribune, and I mean it's all over the state and in Idaho as well. So we try to, when possible, include wines from those regions as well. So tomorrow's column in the Tri-City Herald, you might notice a review of a Cabernet from a winery up in Quincy, which is not really Tri-City Herald country, but it is Wenatchee World country. So we try to make it a little broader distribution for that. And between the two columns, we've got a fairly large potential audience, just because of the number of newspaper readers that still remain out there.
Well, there's got to be not that large a group, but there have to be other people like you that have now specialized in writing about Northwest wines.
You know, there are not as many as you would think.
Wow.
And I think part of it is this industry has grown up so quickly. When Eric and I started this business, we actually talked to a few folks down in California, and I asked one in particular, I said, how many full-time journalists or wine writers are there in California? And he thought for a second. He said, probably 20 to 25. I said, you know how many there are in the Pacific Northwest? And I said, there's like 2. And it was Eric and I. You know, there's some folks who write blogs, but there aren't even that many of them. There are a few folks who write about wine, but it's not necessarily their primary job. So Eric and I saw an opportunity to create a business where we would focus entirely on wine from the Pacific Northwest, and it's worked out very well for the first 3 years that we've done this business.
That's great. Well, it is growing. So let me get your opinion, your take on this. WSU Wine Science Center, it was created, it's built, it's in operation. How do you look at that that not just the building, but what it could do for the wine industry, like in the next 10 years. Do you think that's significant?
I think the Wine Science Center is going to be one of the most significant moments. When it opened this summer, it was one of the most significant moments in the history of Washington wine. I think when we look back in 25 years, we will look back at 2015 as the year of the Wine Science Center. It's that important. Every great wine growing region in the world has a world-class wine research and wine education center, whether it's UC Davis in California, whether it's Geisenheim in Germany, whether it's University of Dijon in Burgundy, University of Adelaide in Australia. All these great wine regions have universities doing great research and great education behind them. Washington now joins that group on a world stage, and I think it's that important. I think the progress that will be made from a research standpoint, especially in vineyard work, but also I think in winemaking work, will take leaps forward in the next 25 years that will be significant to the future of the Washington wine industry.
So there are some people that had real vision.
Absolutely.
When they put this together.
Yeah.
Well, we keep hearing that growers are looking to expand acreage of the number of acres of wine grapes. Are these going to be new acres that require new irrigation, or are they replacing crops? Are growers, farmers making decisions, I'm going to grow a wine grape instead of peaches or whatever?
Well, it's going to be a combination of both. For example, we're seeing this tremendous growth on Red Mountain, which is only a 4,000 acre area, and it's already half covered with wine grapes. And it's probably just about full as far as the amount of acreage that can be planted on Red Mountain. All that is land that in the past has only grown sagebrush and, in one notorious incident, marijuana, at least in the dead of night. And all that is new land under new irrigation, thanks to the Kennewick Irrigation District putting in a system out there. But I think in a lot of other areas, especially in the Yakima Valley, up on the Waldock Slope around Mattawa, and in particular in the Horse Heaven Hills around Alderdale, a lot of this is going to be people who are changing crops. And I think what's interesting about that, for example, let's take the Horse Heaven Hills for example. Lots of agriculture going on out there, and setting aside the dry land wheat farming, which doesn't require irrigation, but let's look at some of the other crops like row crops or orchard crops. When those get converted to vineyards, vineyards use much less water. In fact, let's say you converted an apple orchard to a vineyard. The vineyard's going to use less than half the amount of water. And what that means for the farmer is they can take, say, 100 acres of orchard, take out the 100 acres, and plant 200 acres of vineyards, and use the exact same amount of water. And water is so precious now that those kinds of things are required. And so you end up switching some crops around, but you end up actually being able to use a lot more land, and that's what we're seeing a lot of, especially in the Horse Heaven Hills.
I want to take a break here, but when we come back, I want to look at measuring how well Washington wine is doing by looking at some of the honors that have been earned here in this state. We're back in a moment on Meet in the Middle.
Nice.
John, I appreciate when you remind us that we're going on the air, because here we are just talking about what's going on in the wine industry while the commercial break is running. So what are the honors that Washington wines are earning?
Well, I think the most recent one and most significant this year was the Wine Spectator Top 100. Wine Spectator is by far the largest wine publication in the world, most influential, most important, most widely read, and each November they put out their top 100 wines of the year. And one Washington wine in the past has actually been the #1 wine, and that was in 2009. The Columbia Crest 2005 Reserve Cab was the #1. This year, the #2 wine in the world was from Washington. That was Cool Cedar Creek's Cabernet from the 2012 vintage. And I talked to one of the editors, interviewed him after the list came out, and he said, yeah, it was within a whisper of becoming the #1 wine in the world. It was that close. And in fact, of the top 50 wines, the top half of that list, 20% of the wines were from Washington and Oregon. And so, and these are all the wines in the world. And these are all these, the Wine Spectator tastes 18,000 wines a year from all over the world. And the fact that 20% came from Washington and Oregon was astounding. We dominated the top half of the best wines of the world. Better than Bordeaux, better than California, better than Spain, Germany, Australia, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand.
Mm-hmm. Well, what a great way to describe what this industry is doing for Washington in so many different ways. Wow, that is really astounding. So you are involved in judging wine competitions yourself. What do you like about that?
Well, a number of things. I started judging probably about 15 years ago in California and Northwest, and I've judged up in Canada, I've judged down in Texas, and all over. There's a lot of camaraderie because you see a lot of the same folks, and so you get to know people, and it's always fun to catch up with them and have dinner with them, etc. It's fun to taste a lot of wines because then you get a broader perspective. So people often ask, how do you become a wine expert? Well, you taste a lot of wine, and I taste about 5,000 wines a year. And a lot of these are at wine competitions. So over say a 2 or 3 day period, we'll taste anywhere from 100 to 125 wines a day. And that's a pretty decent pace, and when you're doing that, you get a really good perspective on a particular variety. So let's say we're spending the morning tasting 70 Pinot Noirs. When you taste 70 Pinot Noirs over the course of 3 hours, you become an instant expert on Pinot Noir. And those wines are coming from different areas. They might come from Oregon, they might come from the Russian River Valley in California, they might come from the North Coast, etc. So you're getting different kinds of wines kind of mixed together, if you will, or mixed in, side by side. So you get to see these different perspectives. And then in the afternoon you might taste Petit Syrah or Cabernet or Merlot or something, and then you get that same perspective with being able to taste so many wines at the same time. And the inevitable question, if I can jump ahead, is how don't those wines all taste alike after all?
Yeah.
And in fact, what's interesting to me is the more you taste, the more different they all taste.
Wow.
And so, if I have 10 Chardonnays in front of me, 7 of them might taste very similar because they're the profile of heavy oak or bright fruit or ponderous flavors or whatever. But 3 of those really stand out because they've got something different to it. So those 3 pop out either as very good or not so good, and so it becomes actually much easier the more you taste. And then the other question is I get asked is not to do your job here,
no,
Christine,
that's okay.
but the other question I get asked is, boy, it must be fun, you get to just drink wine all day and it's a party, and I always like to tell them that it's all fun and games until you get to about your 40th Chardonnay in the morning, and then it starts to feel like work.
Yeah.
So.
But you're not actually drinking it.
No.
You're tasting it.
You taste and you spit, and I've actually given myself blood alcohol tests after a long day of tasting. So, like I'll taste 80 or 90 heavy reds, and then I'll give myself a breathalyzer. And typically I blow like a 0.01 or something. It's very, very low. So we absorb almost no alcohol, and that probably was from the beer I'd had with the lunch.
That's really interesting. Okay, so wine tasting and wine judging. I'm going to compare that to being a professional golfer. So it seems to me that when you do that as a living and you're doing it every day and you're practicing as golfers do, for example, it becomes much more difficult to go out and enjoy a round of golf with friends because you're just always in the competitive arena. So can you enjoy a nice bottle of wine with someone else?
Oh, absolutely. And usually I'll try to pick something out that's very interesting to me, or that goes very well with whatever meal we're sharing. My wife often asks, "Hey, do we have any wine?" And I'm like, "Well, it's got about 1,200 bottles. What do you want? What do you want to drink tonight?" And so we'll pick something that we think is very interesting and fun to enjoy. My daughter, who's 11, likes to smell the wine. She doesn't like to taste it, but she likes to smell it and give her own little descriptors of it. So we're starting her kind of early as far as,
yeah, she'll probably know a lot by then.
Yeah.
All right, so you have been so kind to bring me a bottle today called Six Prong by Alder Ridge Winery. Horse Heaven Hills. It's a Cabernet, and you were telling me before that Washington is becoming most well known for Cabernet.
Yeah, and that's interesting because when we think of Cabernet, typically we think of Napa Valley because it's famous for Cabernet. We think of Bordeaux, which is the home of Cabernet. And in the last 10 years, Washington has emerged as a really great place to grow Cabernet. Cabernet is kind of known as King Cab. You can sell a lot of Cabernet in the world. In fact, we have an article on Great Northwest Wine today that Eric wrote about how Texas just loves Washington Cabernet. And he was down in Houston last month for a wine competition. He was just overwhelmed by everybody asking about this producer and that producer from Washington. They all knew the Washington wines down there. They can't buy enough Washington wine down in Texas. So I thought, and our column in this week's Herald is about Washington Cabernet. And I thought, well, I'll bring you a bottle of Cabernet, hoping that you like red wine.
Oh, I love red wine. Yeah. So, very nice. Thank you. That was very kind of you. All right, so I want to know about, obviously, Washington grapes is the foundation of the industry itself. Is there any protection that is needed that other folks will not be carting off with Washington wines? Let's say that a producer of wines in Montana, or, I mean, any state, Florida, could they buy major truckloads of Washington wines, or grapes rather, and create their wine in another state?
Well, and it does happen. You brought up Montana. There are a couple of Montana wineries that use Washington grapes.
Oh.
They're very small producers. They probably just pick up a few tons here and there. There are wineries in Indiana that use Washington grapes. My brother lives in Maine, and he's run across wineries in Maine that use Washington grapes. It says Yakima Valley right on the label.
Oh, okay. So it has to say that on the label.
It doesn't necessarily.
Oh,
they could actually put.
Okay.
They could actually use the appellation of American wine if they wanted to. But we see a little bit of Washington Riesling being made in California because they don't make a lot of grow a lot of good Riesling down there. It's not really Riesling country. But I don't think it's really much of an issue. St. Michel Wine Estates, which is by far the largest wine producer in the state, they own Chateau St. Michel and Columbia Crest and 14 Hands and several other wineries up here. They actually use 2 out of every 3 grapes grown in Washington. And it is of their opinion, I believe, that Washington has kind of run out of wine grapes. They're planting them as fast as they can. They're getting other farmers to plant grapes as quickly as they can because they basically have run out of grapes, and they're actually looking for sources outside of Washington occasionally to fill some of their needs in some of their other portfolios. So I don't think it's much of an issue in Washington. In fact, I think we're planting grapes at a very fast clip just to keep up with the demand in-state.
Mm-hmm. Well, in any industry like this, you always like to look up where are the jobs and where can people make money at this. Everything is all about money and all about commerce. So are there areas of unfilled jobs, or does the future present new opportunities for people and employment?
Well, I think from an agricultural perspective, there's lots of opportunities still. We have about 50,000 acres of wine grapes in Washington now. It's the number 2 wine producing state after California. I think that number could double over the next, say, 15 or 20 years and probably still not fulfill the need for Washington wine. But in a broader sense, I think here we live in the heart of Washington wine country. I mean, here in the Tri-Cities, we're within 60 miles of 90% of the grapes grown. Benton County is the number 1 wine producing, wine production county in the state. Thanks to wineries such as Columbia Crest and Hogue and Barnard Griffin and wineries like that. Yet I don't think we've taken full advantage of the tourism opportunities that there are available. So I think if we looked at areas such as Napa Valley, Sonoma County, even the Willamette Valley near Portland, or within our own state, Woodinville, we would see that there are more opportunities within tourism, but also within industry, looking at some of the underlying pieces of industry. For example, There's a little company called Evergreen Labs in Walla Walla, and they make a product called Wine Away. I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you spill a little red wine on your shirt, you take this little pump bottle and you squirt it, and it makes the wine go away. So it's called Wine Away. They found this little niche within the washing and wine industry to create jobs. And so I think there are those opportunities if someone was to look and say, okay, is there a need for someone to provide barrels, or is there a need for someone to provide the racks that go under the barrels, or other equipment? Are there opportunities within tourism? I think there's tons of opportunities within tourism to enhance this region as a true wine destination.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just at Visit Tri-City's board meeting this morning because I'm on the board for that body that deals with tourism in the Tri-Cities, and Chris Watkins wanted to remind us, like, hey, when you have relatives coming in for the holidays, like over the next several weeks, like, and you want to go visit wineries, don't go to Walla Walla. Sorry, Walla Walla. But we have so many beautiful wineries here. Take them here in the Tri-Cities, that it all starts at home. That seems like really good advice. I mean, Walla Walla has created a good niche for their destination, but again, people are driving by Yakima, they're driving by the Tri-Cities in order to get to Walla Walla.
And I think that here in the Tri-Cities, we've created some good destinations now. With I live in South Richland, so near those 3 wineries that all have restaurants inside.
Yes.
And terrific restaurants. Here in Pasco, Gordon Brothers has a terrific restaurant at the Broadmoor Park. And we're seeing more and more of that, and more reasons for people to not only come to the wineries, but to stay there for a while. And those are the opportunities that I think are available on a broader level just here in the Tri-Cities. I think with not very much work, we could turn this community into a real destination for folks, and I think it already is going in that direction. If we look at, say Santa Rosa, we're about the same size as Santa Rosa, which is right in the heart of Sonoma County. Within just a few minutes drive, you can be in the Russian River, the Alexander Valley, etc. And I think we have that opportunity here for sure. I don't think we're that far away.
Yeah. The potential is astounding. All right, here's my final question. Stocking stuffers for people who love wine. What kind of ideas do you have for us?
Well, I jotted down a couple of things that I think would be interesting. If you're looking for a bottle of wine that would actually fit in a stocking and maybe not pull it off the mantle, Thurston Wolf Winery in Prosser makes several ports, and they're delicious dessert wines, and they're made in half bottles, so they'll actually fit in the stocking. And if you don't want to drive all the way, the whole 30 minutes to Prosser, then go to Barnard Griffin, which has a Syrah port, which is kind of that same shape. So either of those would be excellent stocking stuffers. I always like a good bottle opener. Of course, I've got about 100 of them. But it's always good to have an extra one and to put it in your car in case you end up someplace, at a hotel or something you want to